Welcome to Influencers Anonymous, spilling the tea about why we eat what we eat, a series of interdisciplinary conversations with famed food historian Feliz Prudente Santa Maria. Through the support of the Office of the Vice President of the Loyola Schools and the School of Humanities of Ateneo de Manila University, and with the help of the Ateneo University Press, the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies, in cooperation with the Ateneo Library of Women's Writings, proudly presents today's Food Talk. This is a part of the Filipino Food Month, and so this whole month of April, we had 2 talks at the start of the month. And we're finishing with the last 2 talks or conversations this week. Today is conversation number 3. It's about food sustainability and who influenced what we eat today. I am Dr. Nikki B. Carci-Cruz. I am chair of the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies, and I will be your moderator for this afternoon together with Dr. Christine Michelle Santos, director of the Ateneo Library of Women's Writings. Christine?
Good afternoon, everyone. Our speaker today has authored books seen as gems of Philippine historical and cultural information valued for their vital research foundation. The Governor General's Kitchen, Philippine Culinary Vignettes and Period Recipes from 1521 to 1935, sought to introduce Philippine food history as a special interest. Kain Na, an illustrated guide to Philippine food, was the first picture guide to Philippine cuisine. Pigafetta's Philippine Picnic, Culinary Encounters During the First Circumnavigation of 1519 to 1522, is the first retelling of the historical journey with food as its focus. Our speaker's generosity goes beyond these books. She has also graciously donated her books and personal writings on Philippine culture and beyond at the Ateneo Library of Women's Writings. Last year, she was the recipient of the 2021 Tanglaw ng Lahi Award at Ateneo de Manila University. We are honored to introduce our lovely speaker this afternoon, Feliz Prudente Santa Maria.
Thank you, Christine and Nikki. And thank you for all of you for deciding to spend the rest of the afternoon with us. Before Holy Week, just to review, our first episode was about food security, and it reminded us that a lot of the foods we eat today were actually part of Philippine prehistory. So our food, our flora and fauna go all the way back and include colonial additions as well as contemporary additions. In our second part, we established the fact that Filipinos are omnivores and that even our pagan gods were omnivores, and that as food technology changed and developed, we started to look for the ingredients that could make the delicious foods that all this new food technology could provide us. And today, we're going to look into another aspect of Philippine food. So I'd like you to try and think of the foods that you have cravings for, the foods that you really want to be eating the rest of your life. We need to remember, as we look at this third conversation, that our ancestors have actually been influencing what we eat today, and that even we seem to be influencing what we eat today, and that life is very likely not a situation of constant accidents. Our life, our culture is not the result of constant randomness. Choice matters. And with that, let's take a look at what we have for today's recording. Welcome to the third of 4 videos about how Philippine food history shapes contemporary cuisine and culture. Many anonymous persons affect what we like to eat. They are principal players in a story about food sustainability that is an ongoing challenge. In 1598, when Manila, as Spain's center in Asia, was 27 years old, the Spanish judge Antonio de Morga reported that natives were not farming rice and other food supplies as they had before because the men were forced by the local government to fell trees, construct boats, quarry, build infrastructure, and work in dismal, if not fatal, conditions. He also warned that unless the size of mesh used by Chinese overseas workers for nets was regulated, the supply of fish would be exhausted. In addition, he added that Chinese and Japanese traders were buying so much deerskin for export that the supply of game eaten by Indios and Spanish alike was threatened. Even in the 16th century, before sustainability became a keyword, it was recognized that the long-term effects of contemporary action could be devastating for the future. 37 years ago, in 1987, sustainability was added as a new international strategy to protecting the entire food supply chain. Member countries of the United Nations recognize, firstly, that every citizen of the world and all governments share responsibility for the environment that affects food availability. And secondly, that feeding the present world population must not compromise the ability of future generations to feed themselves. Building on earlier efforts, in 2015, UN member states such as the Philippines began implementing 17 Sustainable Development Goals to reach by 2030. All the goals interrelate and need help from ordinary people, not just governments, to attain them. Kindly take a little time to review the 9 goals emphasized on screen. They are the most commonly associated with being well fed. It is concerns about food sustainability that ushered in experimentation and debates about organic or intensive farming, free range or factory farm, fair trade and food fraud, food waste and food miles, genetically modified foods, and the idea of eating lower on the food chain. The plant-based diet is one manifestation of the latter. The Sustainable Development Goals keep idealism alive as they seek each new generation to acquire the critical capacity needed to protect the food supply chain. Do you want your favorite foods to be around forever? Will you always like them? Let us visit 3 topics that affect the foods we like and food sustainability. First, we will revisit traditional safety and religious taboos. Secondly, we will quickly check on the chemistry of flavor. And lastly, we will glimpse what makes our foods desirable to each of us personally. What we like to eat includes foods such as rice, pig, and chicken offered to pagan gods because they reputedly liked them. Both pagan and Christian prayers included the blessing of food and thanking the divine for it. Christian missionaries disliked wastage. They warned that every grain of uneaten rice, including those that fell to the ground, meant 1 extra day in purgatory. Pagan gods in charge of weather and abundant harvests were replaced by patron saints, such as Santa Clara de Assisi for good weather and San Isidro Labrador as patron of farmers. Bread and wheat, grapevines, grape wine, and lamb were unknown in the Philippines. Missionaries sought native words for sermons and catechism classes when explaining them. They selected one word for both bread and host from a term recorded in 1521 during Magellan's visit, tinapay. Tinapay was a rice cake undescribed in detail. Alak, the native generic term for wine, was used even if it meant wine from palms and rice. Fasting, abstinence, and feasting were practiced by Indios before they became Muslim or Christian. Spanish missionaries introduced their universal calendar, commemorating events in the life of Jesus and the church, and went to fast, abstain, or feast for each event. Seeking to orient their converts well, they preached against excessive eating and getting drunk. Both habits could prompt greed and were branded as gluttony, which was one of 7 deadly sins. On Panay in the 1600s, hayat was curbing of the appetite or suffering hunger when done for virtue or necessity. Tilo similarly meant not eating more than what was enough. During 40 days of Lent and every Friday, Christians were prohibited from eating meat and meat products. It was said that Christ died on a Friday to save humankind, and thus no more blood should be shed. Others interpret abstaining from meat as reminding that Jesus was a simple carpenter's son and fished the meal of the poor. Feasting is the counterpoint to culinary sacrifices. Pork is a Spanish festival food, and eating it since the Renaissance proved one was neither Jew nor Muslim. Although there are pre-colonial native words for pork, it is the Spanish word for pig, lechon, that is used when referring to the fiesta's spit-roasted whole pig. The Jesuit missionary Ignacio Francisco Alsina recorded in the mid to late 1600s that during Christmas there were always sweets in the meals priests hosted for the leading men and women of their parish. Fiesta foods were considered delicious and truly a respite from the everyday rice and fish diet. One could eat an unlimited quantity of them at fiestas. Traditions are not enough, however, to determine everything one likes to eat. Hunger, gutom in the national language, is a physiological demand to provide the body with energy so it can function. It does not require delicious food, although the body is primed to seek calorie-rich sustenance. The body simply wants to survive. Many old Philippine words reveal that prolonged hunger was a reality. Hunger has a chemical chain. An empty stomach, a low blood sugar level, and a rise in the hunger hormone ghrelin can cause the body to feel hungry. As the body eats, it releases leptin, a hormone that curbs feelings of hunger. When the body has eaten enough, the vagus nerve signals the hypothalamus directly and the hunger drive is reduced. Thinking of chemicals produced by the body, though, is no enticement to eat. We have been seduced by appetite and its appreciation of flavor. Appetite, what in Filipino is called gana, is the desire to eat even if one is not physically hungry. Seeing, smelling, or remembering food can prime the appetite. Cravings for specific foods can be triggered by the lack of specific nutrients, but they are often psychologically induced by stress or boredom. The most popular craved foods are commonly high in fat, sugar, or both, sparking a rush of pleasing chemicals in the brain. Think of the foods you suddenly want as a midnight snack or when you need to feel loved and happy. Just the mere thought of certain flavors makes us want to eat. Philippine cultures appreciate the flavor of foods and have a rich culinary vocabulary to prove it. Taste emerges when the brain becomes enchanted by what the tongue and the mouth sense as a team. Actually, though, taste is the perception made by sensory cells all over the tongue. There's no zone per taste, although the sides of the tongue are more sensitive to all the tastes than the center of the tongue. The very back of the mouth is a warning area. It is sensitive to bitterness that can indicate toxicity. There are Filipino terms for the four oldest universal tastes: salty, sour, sweet, and bitter. A Filipino word for umami needs to be identified. Umami is the savory taste of meat, the taste of proteins. It is triggered by glutamates found in meats, shellfish, cheeses, and fermented food like bagoong. Coconut amino is an umami-rich alternative to soy sauce for those allergic to soy or who are gluten sensitive. Spanish colonials from the 1500s through the 1800s described Filipino food as primarily salty and sour. Both tastes can induce a sweat in the hot climate and remind the body to keep hydrated and electrolytes balanced. There is a wide variety of traditional leaves, flowers, and fruits, providing Filipino gastronomy sources for engaging sourness, ranging from mellow to mouth puckering. It is true that we eat with our noses before taking a first bite. Food begins its seduction by using airborne volatile chemicals that travel along a person's nasal cavity into the olfactory receptor cells. Flavor chemists today are discovering methods to trick the nose and help curb overindulgence of liked foods eaten in unhealthy quantities. Gastrophysicists are finding ways to trick the eyes, likewise, to limit overeating of favorite foods. The Filipino culinary vocabulary recorded during Spanish colonial times substantiates that Filipino ancestors distinguished savor and deliciousness. They also have words for bad cooking, terrible smells, and unsafe food. Lasap offers a link between taste and having an enjoyable experience. Linamnam prompts queries into what cooks and their guests consider the qualities for exquisiteness of taste as experienced by the nose, the tongue, and in mouthfeel. As Filipino gastronomy earns its place of honor in world cuisine, the qualities defining linamnam can honor the development of Philippine culinary artistry. So can an increase in Philippine literature about flavor. In gourmet parlance, flavor is the combination of aroma, taste, and texture. Filipino culture is very tactile. Even in its interpersonal relations, there is a lot of socially acceptable touching, holding hands, and embracing. The Filipino meal resists boredom by providing many multiple aromas, tastes, and textures in one dish or one meal. Old Cavite families, for instance, served tender kare-kare, accompanied by a crisp adobo that served as a textural counterpoint. Traditional cuisine is engaged in a constant competition with new innovations to remain beloved. Foods worthy of being given as gifts are an indication of what pleased the appetite in olden times. Fresh fruits were very important to the colonial and Commonwealth diets. Atis was the favorite, unseeded only by mango, introduced from India in the late 17th century. Balimbing from Ternate in Indonesia was sweeter than the locally grown. Chico was described as like coffee and milk sherbet combined. Lanzones reminded of Chinese lychee in texture. Durian was desired for its buttery texture and sweetness. The sampling of liked foods shown might include some that are unknown or unavailable today. Do you recognize any of them? Are they among the foods you like? Every person customizes a personal brand of deliciousness. The expectations of that deliciousness depend on many factors, such as genetic inheritance and life experiences. New research reveals that a person's sweetness perception is about 30% influenced by genes. Some liked foods are those eaten by a person's mother when he or she was still in the womb. The human body likes saturated fat because eating it releases relaxing dopamine and stimulates pleasure points in the brain. The foods a Filipino likes and might consider delicious more than others include those linked to happy or positive social experiences. There are traditional fiesta foods eaten in the company of others during happy gatherings. And there's comfort foods associated with maternal care, clearing away negative feelings and celebrating with people who matter. Social media is affecting food likability. It increases the role of peer endorsement that employs both visual stimulation and social cues. Will your favorite foods survive the competition? Many anonymous persons continue influencing how we select the foods we like. Our choices go beyond ingredients and food products produced in the Philippines. We can eat the planet on the Filipino table. But the challenge now is, should we still like and consume our favorite foods and beverages?
Thank you very much, Ma'am Feliz, for that third lecture, recorded lecture. Welcome to all of you who are joining us on YouTube or on Facebook or here in the Zoom room. We will be monitoring the chat box. If you have any questions or comments and you want to chime in, you can type them as a comment on YouTube or Facebook or here in the chat box, and we will relay and read your questions as best as we can. So now we're going to start our conversation. We're going to start, ma'am, if it's okay with you, with this quote from your presentation. You started with saying how food sustainability is not only caring for the natural environment, but it's also caring for people and making sure that they're fed nutritiously and honorably. And one of the things that struck me is Ateneo has just recently enunciated its aspiration to become a Laudato Si university, which means that in 7 years it wants to be aligned with the Pope's latest encyclical on the environment, to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And in your talk, you talked about things like gutom and gana. And those two things, I think, can be framed in a way that captures the questions that the Pope is making us think about. No? So we started asking people about the paradox of a relationship between abundance and hunger that happens simultaneously in the Philippine setting. So let me start with a poem from Mike Corosa, Kagawaran ng Filipino. He's the chair of the Filipino department. The title of the poem is Kumain Ka ng Kumain. And I'll read it.
Oh my God.
Sabi ng lola mo, mabubuhay ka ng talaga at sang-ayon akong sintakaw nga kita. Sige lang anak, kumain ka ng kumain hanggat kami ng iyong nanay ay may naihahain. Ganyan nga, matuto kang mag-ulam ng kahit ano. Sa lungsod, kahit talbos at kangkong ay may presyo. Paglaki mo anak, sana'y ganyang ka rin. Subong Jollibee, kahit ulam ay asin. This is from his book Mula sa Dilit Dilim, 1997. Okay, so we want you to comment on, so of course the title is Kumain Ka ng Kumain, no? But we really want you to comment on this culture of the unli. No? So we asked people about this, the unli trend that seems to have permeated the restaurant space and a culture of abundance in a country that has so many people suffering from involuntary hunger. But there's an appeal to this buffet spirit. No? For example, Patrick Kapili, chair of the Modern Languages Department, says he subscribes to buffets and unli offerings because he thinks it's money and time well spent. It solves the problem of having to consider various food preferences among companions and guests. No? It makes everybody happy. And they usually go for occasions like birthdays or Christmas, no? Special occasions. And they get to eat food they don't eat every day. No? So Patrick goes for expensive ones, like the salmon and tuna and sashimi or baked oysters that you don't cook at home. Megan from our office in the IS department, she really loves the only trends like only wings and the samgyeopsal, Korean wave. Occasionally, like birthdays, they go for samgyeop and only wings. And among those variety of Korean grill meats, her favorite is bulgogi and wagyu. Also in the wings menu, she likes the salted egg menu and the parmesan flavor. Okay, but there are people who don't subscribe to this trend too much. Jonathan Chua, the dean of the School of Humanities, is indifferent to the only trend. He hardly goes to buffets, but if he does, when he goes for the sweets and the meats, and he feels full and happy. Jean Tan, also from the IS department, says, I only subscribe to buffets when I have to. At office parties, family events, they're not conducive to conversation. They're not very relaxing because people are always getting up, going around. And there are those who are averse, no? Because we've had people who like, people in the middle, and people who don't. Luigi Alfonso is one of our faculty in IS, and he says it's absolutely not for him for two specific reasons. It's really wasteful. And even if they have measures against curbing food waste, like making you pay for your extra, it preys on other people's tendency to gorge on food. So if a management student says, no, I get full fast and I vomit easily, so I cannot subscribe to the trend. I only get to eat in restaurants like Only Samgyup or buffet if it is a family or friend special event. While Harley, who made this PowerPoint, said, I used to, but not anymore because I get full too easily. I also don't like the feeling of bloating, and I have friends who do a lot of the only trend though, but it's not for him. Okay, so in our next slide, well, sorry, on the first, Kirsten, sorry. Kirsten, do you want to frame before we ask the question?
Sure, no problem. I actually was thinking about this idea of caring for people, and that, when, of course, when we attend or we go to these buffets, it's always in celebration of something. No? It's not like we're just going to go there. Well, I guess for the younger ones, they would go there on a weekend, to celebrate with their friends, not just being able to spend time with their friends. But I think with this only trend that highlights this sense of abundance, and at the same time, this endless, I guess, buffet or array of food that doesn't seem to have any sense of portion whatsoever. And this made me reflect a lot on some of the early American period housekeeping manuals and guidebooks, and a lot of them teach sustainable food practices and cooking practices for students back then. No? And I recently purchased Appetite for Freedom by Maria Orosa, and I was looking at the recipes, and they would just say, you'll need tokwa, patis, and so on. And without really saying for how many is this dish supposed to be, and in terms of food portion. And that made me think, did we have some kind of foundational education as early as, I don't know, the Spanish period or maybe the American period in terms of food portioning? Did we receive such education in preparing and also in producing food? So if with all of these wonderful experiences on only eating and, and this idea of food portioning, would you like to spill the tea on your thoughts on food portion and lack thereof?
Well, Kirsten knows the American period so well, and allow me to say that I really enjoyed your lecture, Kirsten.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed posting the link to it, because we need more researchers and writers like Kirsten. And Michael, by the way, the poem by Michael, when Governor General's Kitchen was launched, Michael was the one who put together all these Filipino songs, peacetime songs about food. So it launched with all these songs, that Michael chose and sang, and he had some other people who were with him. So I really enjoy having this link again with someone who's very dear to me. I think I'd like to begin by saying first, if you'll recall, I think it was somewhere in the first or the second talk, we mentioned the word ginhawa. And I think we explained that ginhawa, which can be interpreted in many ways, like well-being or happiness or satisfaction or joy. Ginhawa became the word for the fiesta meal. So we thought of having ginhawa, experiencing ginhawa by eating unlimited amounts of fiesta food. Okay, so that's in our DNA, no? The ginhawa and the unlimited and the joy that unlimited eating of foods we consider delicious can bring us. And that is that coupled with the Filipino desire for variety. We like diversity, whether it's diversity on one little plate where we have all the different sawsawans and pickles and textural counterpoints all on one plate, or whether it's the buffet where we have our plate and we put lots and lots of different kinds of food. Filipino gastronomy really supports diversity on the plate. So you have diversity on the plate, and then you had ginhawa or unlimited eating of deliciousness as part of something that Filipinos value. So that's like the big buffet and the unlimited whatever. But you see, once upon a time, which is what we've been trying to point out, you only had unlimited amounts of deliciousness when you had a fiesta. And the fiesta fare had a counterpoint. If you followed the Roman Catholic calendar, it meant that there were certain times of the year when you had to fast and when you had to abstain, and then you could feast. And then again, as the cycle continued, you would have to fast again, abstain again, and then you could feast, okay? But the foods that were once considered fiesta fare, we can eat them every day now. We can either make them at home or we can buy them if we have the money to buy them. And so this becomes the new challenge. How much of all these delicious, high-calorie, dopamine-releasing foods should we actually be eating? How much of it on a daily basis or on a weekly basis? And I think the new findings of when women are pregnant and what they eat affects what happens to the child when the child is born. You know, these are recent findings that if a mother eats a lot of sugary things, it's very likely that her child will be predisposed to liking sugary foods. We never knew that before. Now, Kirsten is right that during the American period, they had nutritional guides. And so you were advised, you know, to eat only certain foods and have a balanced diet. In terms of quantities, I wouldn't say that they really emphasized don't overeat, but clearly to be bundat. And the idea of buli-buli and other, you know, and having empacho and all of that, those were not desired. They were not desired. And the body was regulating. But now I think we need to rethink what will be the rules by which we will eat.
We have a question. Is that okay? Or a comment?
Yeah, please. I'm going to keep talking until you tell me to stop.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, magandang hapon po, Ma'am Felice. Hi, Christine. Hi, Nikki.
Magandang hapon po.
Opo, magandang hapon po. Nagtaas po ako ng kamay kasi yung pong I was stirred when you said that culturally the fiestas seem to be our experience as ng Anli bago nagkaroon ng commercial na version yung Anli. Because that was what I was typing on the chat box right before you said it. So I deleted it kasi sabi ko, and of course, ang preamble ko, my experience of Anli, yung before I was attracted to Anli as someone who has purchasing power now as a professional, talagang sa barangay, babalik po ako sa Marikina because practically at least once a quarter or once every 2 months, there's a barangay that we could go to attend a friend's, a household or kamag-anak na may piyesta and only yung pagkain. Oo. But I guess, ang gusto ko siguro talaga, Ma'am Felice, after ko din i-share, how can we also understand culturally kaya sustainability? Because para sa akin, Ma'am, yung complexity of HIA is how I would interpret or parang yun ang roots ng sustainability for me. Yung when I say complexity of HIA, kasi sasabihin sa'yo, nakakahiya, wag kang kumuha ng marami kasi may ibang bisita. Which means, it seems in that phrase, limited yung supply. But at the same time also, nakakahiyang magtira sa pinggan because ang rational, at least sa binibigay sa akin ay, bukas naman yung hapagkainan, you can always get whenever you can. So, ba't ka kukuha ng sobra? So, hindi explicit yung sustainability turo doon. Hindi sinasabi, paano maging sustainable ang buhay? Hindi ganun. But I think may roots doon yung how we understand sustainability. You only get what you can because it's always there. But you also understand that the supply is not just for you. So, I guess, ayun, no? I guess my question, Ma'am Felice, is meron pa kayang ibang mga ganitong karanasan na culturally that allows for a more, a more Filipino experience of how we can understand sustainability? Kasi yung sustainability ngayon, di ba, parang economics, scientific, ganon. Pero meron din kaya na Filipino way of experiencing or understanding sustainability. Yun lamang po.
Ma'am,
Kaya po,
before you answer, can I just say Ariel Diccion will also be our moderator on Thursday, but he didn't stop himself from coming. We're looking forward, Ariel. Pero ma'am, pwede makisingit din. Ariel, ang ganda pala nung sinabi mo kasi yung may bayad na buffet, wala ka nang hiya doon kasi nagbayad.
Oo, yes. Yes, walang at nakakahiya yung oo,
Gusto mo
para
sulit.
Oo,
Hindi ba? Kung babayad ka lang sa buffet, kailangan sulit. Di kumain ka ng kumain para sulit.
Oo, ganda ng point mo. Ariel, ngayon ko lang naisip yan. Ma'am, sorry, go ahead.
No, but that's true, which is precisely why I wanted to share these food discussions. Because I agree. Remember, I have over a decade of experience with UNESCO. And how do you take something like sustainability and bring it into the personal experience, no? Tamang-tama talaga yan eh. The question is, what do we have locally? And I sincerely believe that it is by talking about food that maybe we can better understand that sustainability means, okay, I'm not talking about strategies, okay? I'm just talking about the concept that sustainability means that we don't want anybody to go hungry. We want zero hunger. And sustainability will also require some amount of individual discipline, individual choice, you see. If, for instance, we eat a lot today because it's, quote, fiesta, somebody's birthday or a provincial fiesta or whatever, then does that mean that the next day we have to now be a little more tame about what we eat? Will it also mean that some of the dishes that we will be serving in a commercial buffet or in a festival buffet, are we going to be a little more careful about what we serve? See, in other words, we are carrying over into the 21st century not only prehistoric and pre-colonial ingredients, we are also carrying over remnants of some of our colonial customs. And while we respect them, maybe they need to be rethought so that we can still continue the heritage aspect of it, but tweak it so that for the 21st century, maybe it's more appropriate. See, that's why precisely I chose Ateneo for this first experiment, to see what professors and young people would say about this. Because the choices, if you take a look at if you go back, you play this back, and you look at all the favorite foods that I listed, they're at random. And some of those favorite foods are still around, like the lechon, of course, but other foods that were favorites are no longer around. People made choices. They said, oh, I think we don't like that anymore. I think we prefer this instead. So in other words, we can revise what we like. We can find other foods that might be healthier and like them more than what we ate before. I mean, these are the things that I just want to bring to the table. Because food history is not only what is in the past. We need to understand each one of us is making food history today. Our choices are going to affect the future. That's part of sustainability. We are history makers.
Right.
So
Ma'am-
what kind of a future are we making?
Ma'am, there's activity in the chat box. Earl Rojas, do you want me to read this or do you want to share this yourself? Earl? Okay.
I'm looking real closely.
Yeah, I can read it.
I'm
Earl,
so nearsighted. I'm so nearsighted, guys.
Earl, you can unmute yourself, but I can start. No, he says, I think this conversation can't be any more timely, given the food crises we are currently facing. Fast food chains are already limiting the sales of potato products due to certain potato varieties being subject to shortages. Indonesia's recently declared an embargo in exporting palm oil, of which they are the largest palm oil producers. Earl, pwede ka pa mag-unmute ha. Given this, we now no longer experience shortages because of indulgent experiences like buffets and fiestas, but experience with what we consider as ordinary daily food. Yeah. So, okay. Ma'am, let me know if you want to comment or if we move to the next topic, which is still tied to what Earl is saying anyway. Okay, Harley, let's share. No? So, ma'am, you said we make personal choices. So, from your slide, you talked about how beef, pork, fowl, egg, milk, butter, cheese, and all that, no, which we are not allowed to take during too much during Lent when we're supposed to sacrifice. They come back with a vengeance, or we come back with a vengeance.
Yes.
All the good stuff. So we ask people about how they consume meat, no, because before that, another Michael Carosa poem. This time, hamburger.
Oh, hamburger. Okay.
Sa kanto, nilalandi ng naglilima yung usok ng hamburger ang aking ilong. Makarot na nahagik ang pitik ng mantika. Nakapaglalaway ang pagsusubo ng karne, kamatis at pickle, at ang pagtaktak ng ketchup sa nakangangang tinapay. Hayun, ngayon, naghihintay ang hamburger sa platito. Inaanyayahan ang aking kagat. Kanina pa nga ako gutom, pero sabi ng doktor, ang karne nakakaalta presyon. Okay. All right. So our next slides.
Totoo yan, ha?
So we asked people about their meat consumption. Okay, and then here's what we got from some of our faculty. So Luigi called himself a confirmed meativore. Of course, he really carnivore. And I absolutely especially chicken. A world without meat is not a world at all. But I do recognize that its consumption is not sustainable for the earth. So I feel a bit bad about my own complicity or complicitness at times. So yes, I love chicken and beef. It's just easier to chew and eat than pork and has more taste. I've tried pescatarian diet before, so I tried transitioning to less meat. Harley says, when I know I cannot eat for a long time, I need to eat meat in a meal because if it's just vegetables, I get hungry too easily. Usually the food only lasts in my system for 1 to 2 hours.
Right.
That's true. In the next slide, Carl Castro says it's hard to wean away from chicharon because of its crispiness and saltiness. It is that sensory pleasure of taste and crunch that one needs when wrangling through difficult ideas or moments. This is probably why I also love Bagnet and their love child, Bagnet Chicharon. So Carl showed me this bucket of chicharon he ordered.
Oh, wow.
Delivery from Rosso. Yan lang po yan sa White Plains. So they deliver
Oo,
it.
alam ko yan. Nakikita ko rin po yan.
Jean Tan says she likes stews, probably because that's how I ate meat growing up. Pork adobo, dinuguan, kare-kare, asado, asadong lengua. And for Jonathan Chuardin is very funny with words. Something roasted, something skewered, something baked or fried, something swimming in sauce just as long as it's edible and cooked, foul fish, and most of all, porkers. All right, next slide. Siguro do you want to turn, Christine?
Let's see. Ano pa?
Si Patrick
Ano pa?
again from Modern Languages. Nakakatawa. I hardly eat beef and pork but I used to feast on bistek. Pero yung bistek niya made with pork chops. with broccoli. Nakakatawa yung bistek. May bistek na chicken bistek. May bistek na beef. May bistek na bangus. May bistek na pork. But he's more of a chicken and fish person. And he can live without beef, pork, maybe, but cannot live without chicken. Next slides. Siguro, Christine, I'll turn over to you starting from these slides. No?
Sure. So Abby, shares that she loves soup and stew based dishes, and she tends to avoid pork and beef. But her comfort food, includes the famous, recently viral tinola and sinampalukan manok, and well, she's lucky, medyo mahirap ngayon makahanap ng sampalok, na hindi nor, Nina, I prefer chicken dishes like adobong manok and roast chicken. These are my childhood favorites and remind me of birthday parties and holiday family get-togethers. And we also look into the idea of fish, seafood, and vegetables as this idea of foods for sacrifice and poverty. We also have comments on these. So for Jean, she does not subscribe to a plant-based diet, but I agree that it is more morally worthy to go plant-based. I like vegetables and consume them a lot, but most of our vegetable dishes are cooked with shrimp and or pork. Even pinakbet is cooked with bagoong. Still, we regularly have salads with steamed vegetables with vinegar dressing or okra, talong, talbos ng kamote. And for fresh salads, we have pako. Nina says that she tries to subscribe to a flexitarian diet where we prefer to eat plant-based whenever possible. I try to swap out as much meat with plant-based alternatives because of environmental impacts of the meat industry. Abby shares that mongo without meat, vegetable fritters like okoy but no shrimp, champurrado with soy milk, ginataan and ginataan vegetables are her plant-based staples.
Sorry, Abby and Nina are both from the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability.
He then, I think from the Fine Arts Department, would share that there are many reasons why I am a vegetarian. Vegetarianism is the easiest and most efficient way to a more environmentally sustainable lifestyle. Climate change may set the world on fire within a generation, and switching to a vegetarian diet helps you do your part to reduce it. But we still need to demand structural change, of course. Animal welfare is another reason. It's actually the one it all started when I was 15. No? Even now, every time I see a truck crammed full of live pigs passing by at Katipunan, and this is every day, he is thankful not to be contributing to their misery. And their third reason is health. No? He's a biker, no? So I bike faster than my meat-eating friends. No? Traditional Filipino cuisine has a lot to offer. Munggo, laing, tokwa, sinigang with veggies, langka, lumpiang sariwa, to name just a few. Even more restaurants and food stalls are offering vegan versions of Pinoy dishes. Sarap. His partner is also vegetarian. He didn't have to persuade him, and the quality of his cooking did. No, it's not really that hard to be a vegetarian in Manila if you have the patience to explain it again and again. Only one time a restaurant, Army Navy, made a mistake and served him beef. No, only one bite made me physically sick for a day. I think lastly we have Yala. No,
No, IS student. She's currently one of our students. I'm sorry about that. I'm introducing her. Okay, go ahead, Christine.
It's all right. So, Yala's been saying that she's been subscribing to a plant-based diet. No, she's vegetarian for 1 year and 4 months now. After 5 years of transitioning from a carnivorous diet to a pescopolio vegetarian to a pescatarian diet. My omission of red meat was a very personal decision due to my 15-year-old association of pork with human flesh. Okay, I decided to go full on plant-based vegetarian because of two concrete reasons. I was made aware of how flagrant overfishing is and how I was alarmed by the unsustainable and unethical practices and processes just to get fish on my plate. Two, I had cats who loved and needed fish. Hence, my logic was I would give up fish for my cats, thereby reducing my participation in this overfishing problem and streamlining the harvest in the fishery industries to my cats. No? Besides these two, I didn't really prefer fish. I just consumed it for protein, so I knew I could let it go. There's dominant misconception about plant-based diets, though. When one's plant-based, many people, from her experience, assume that it's either all about omitting the meat and going for meat alternatives or eating just plain boring leaves. For me, though, a plant-based diet means maximizing the nutrients and benefits sourced from plants. This means consuming more vegetables, fruits, and plant protein sources like beans, legumes, and tofu. Plant-based diets are often misconstrued as diets in the extremes, either purely processed meat alternatives, or the joke goes eating damo, no? At best, lupa as a taunt at worst. Yet plant-based diets are supposed to be colorful, no? With emphasis on plants. A plant-based diet to me means channeling energy from nature and committing to a mindful disposition that our produce don't sprout naturally. They depend on the energy, love, and extreme hard work of our farmers. I may have subscribed for very particular reasons, but I continue to deepen my plant-based journey with a mindful disposition to center the farm-to-table process and the unity of energy in nature in my diet. That's really interesting, no? Hearing the thoughts of people who've switched to plant-based diets. And as I mentioned earlier, no, and as Felice mentioned as well, no, I looked into American guidebooks and manuals, no, and even I was surprised that back then there were actually more recipes for vegetables, and they really encourage the consumption of vegetables, no? And at one point in reading those guidebooks, I was also reflecting, when did it change? When did our love for our passionate love for meat, no, come in? No? And given, I was imagining, did we have refrigeration? Did refrigeration help or change the way we consume meat? No, and did we have, you know, perhaps a different cultural understanding or appreciation of vegetables? And maybe this might be onset now because of the war and so on. So, Felice, would you like to spill the tea and your thoughts on plant-based diets? Because I mean, I know there's this chant, no, on kamote, no, go home and plant kamote, no. But when I read all of those textbooks, then, no, they actually had hundreds of recipes on kamote alone, and to this day, a lot of communities eat kamote. So, do please spill the tea, no, on this change, no, from kamote to now everybody wants their chicharon, their adobo, and, you know, only, you know, samgyup even.
I think what happened is that at some point, especially at the turn of the millennium, into the start of this new century, we had meat became accessible because we started importing meat. And if you remember, okay, before the local meat industries really had difficulty. You know, cattle ranching, local dairy supply. We really had difficulty. That's why there was, before the war and after the war, there was all of that. Go to Mindanao, set up ranches in Mindanao, because we need more meat. We need more milk. And the idea was, let us raise the meat locally. Let us make local milk so we don't need to spend foreign currency on importing food. And what happened though was somewhere along the way, we still were not meeting the local consumption requirements. And it became easier to augment the supply by importing. And this is where those of you who are planning to look into food history, into the economics of food, into the ethics of eating, you have to look at this period probably between 1980s all the way to today. And you will see there is a progression in the amount of meat that was available. Now, what you will remember probably, there's this sudden, you know, the malls, remember the malls started to open up from 2000 onwards. And so then we had a lot of entrepreneurs going into the food business. And of course, there was that old belief that if you invest in food, you might be able to make up to 150% of your investment. So it became very enticing. Plus, we had more students graduating from culinary schools. And these are kids who want to have their own businesses. I mean, we can't blame them for that. And so now there's more of the need again, the need for more meat and more fish. And the meat and the fish have to be of a certain size, a certain weight. There's a certain uniformity once you move into the restaurant business, okay? And they're all taught to calculate their earnings in a restaurant based on certain standards of size and weight, okay? So what happens now is we have these big supermarkets that are warehouse type supermarkets. We never had that. When I was growing up, we never had that. The biggest supermarket was Acme, and it was so small, okay? Then the next biggest supermarket was Unimart in Green Hills. We never had anything as big as Unimart until Unimart, which is still the same size, opened. But now there's even bigger than Unimart. And they are chains. There are lots of chains of big warehouse type supermarkets. And the amount of local and foreign products that are sold by these warehouses are really abundant. And you now have a variety of costs. So sometimes you have, this is the local chicken, and this is the foreign chicken. So which will my budget, which is more appropriate for my budget? If I'm raising children and I have a limited budget, sometimes the foreign might be cheaper. Okay, so this has become the very convoluted system. And now when we talk about sustainability, it's not as simple as saying, okay, let's farm everything locally. The investment that has gone into the whole food supply chain, where we are importing foods from different parts of the region, as well as from overseas, all of this is to factor in. And then you say, okay, I'm not going to buy this imported product. We're going to try and make it locally. So you need the capitalization for that. And then you sort of say, so what happens to all the people that produced this in the country where it came from? They're also farmers. So if I stop buying their product, are they now going to become poor farmers?
Ma'am Feliz, someone contacted me in the chat box. I think it's very timely to call him in. Someone from the Le Cordon Bleu in Ateneo, Earl Rojas. So you did mention about people who are now graduating from culinary school and getting into the food business. So let's hear from one of those guys in that field. Earl, you have the floor.
Hi, Earl.
Hi, good afternoon. It's great to be around again. I was able to join the first lecture, but I wasn't able to join the second lecture because we were catching up on the fiscal year's closing of books. So people in Ateneo know this very well. So we had to catch up with a lot of approvals. But all I can say is that I highly appreciate these activities that are being done within the Ateneo community, and I think it's coinciding with the courses that we offer in collaboration with the School of Management. So here at the Cordon Bleu Ateneo Institute, we do offer a food philosophy course for our bachelor's degree in restaurant entrepreneurship students. So we offered that last sem, so I think it would have been nice if their professors would have been able to promote this, but nonetheless, again, I would just like to reiterate my high appreciation of these talks.
Thank you so much. You know, when I was very young, maybe younger than you, my goal was to either enroll in Lavaran or in Le Cordon Bleu. But then my life took me elsewhere, and I said I can't do leisure culinary studies, you know. So I'm so glad that you have that opportunity. And while Le Cordon Bleu has the culinary philosophy course, which is very laudable, because of course things are changing. We also have other schools here in the Philippines and overseas that are offering new approaches to the restaurateur, to the entrepreneur. And so there's hope. But the thing is, again, they could be providing all these things, all these new foods, but I hope that we will make the decision to try them. You see, I wonder, I kind of personally wonder if you've got a new restaurant that says, we're doing it plant-based, will people buy the plant-based over the meat-based? I know there's a restaurant, an American fast food chain at UP Town, and I had read from their American headquarters that they were going to offer a plant-based alternative to their beef burger. But I haven't tried it yet. So, I mean, I'm not a burger person to begin with. I have to confess that I have been pretty much off meat since 2000. So we do a lot of plant-based. We don't look for the taste of meat. Once in a while, to be polite, I will eat. And when I eat, I want it to be really the best because I'm going to be sacrificing. And my digestion is going to go crazy because it isn't used to meat, fish, chicken, and I only eat a little. Do you realize? Okay, maybe here my Le Cordon Bleu friend can help me because the research I have is that the amount of meat that most people need per day is no bigger than a credit card.
I thought it was a matchbox.
Oh, you're even worse. See? A credit card folded. Give you a matchbox. But again, you see, it's the perception. It's the perception. How much do we need, one, to be healthy? And secondly, how much do we need to satisfy? Is it hunger or appetite?
You know, I think traditional Filipino dishes cut meat in very small parts to distribute it to, so many people can have a share. You can just imagine what the bopis looks like or the sisig looks like. But, now it's big chunks of meat for one person, like a whole big slab of steak. And that's not the way, the thingy mode is of sharing. So, but
Well,
ma'am,
it's because the bigger the size, that means the wealthier you are. The bigger the cuts, that's why there's some ways of, I'm sure Kirsten will find the recipes that, if you go into the early cooking, the bigger the sizes, that meant that you could afford to feed more people, bigger sizes. So I was sort of sometimes horrified because the way we cook is a little different, but everybody has their own way of cooking meat. And if we would cut them into little cubes, sometimes I'd go somewhere where the cubes were maybe triple the size. I go, how am I going to eat that? And especially if you're in a setting where they don't give you knives.
yeah.
Okay, that's the traditional setting, So you go, okay, I've got a fork and I've got a spoon. Now, what happens if the meat is tough? Okay.
But that's part of the Filipino skill set, the ability to cut meat with your spoon.
Right. But may the meat be tender enough.
Yeah.
You see? So, I mean, there are all these considerations when one eats and when one cooks. But I think the crux of the matter for today is really, are we, because I believe we are at a tipping point. It's actually tipped already, okay? You can't have 38 years of preaching sustainability and scientists looking into how we can deal with obesity, how we can deal with diabetes, how we can deal with hypertension by fixing the way the food looks, fixing the smells of the food, in other words. Do you know that if you eat with a smaller plate, okay, this is an example of 21st century approaches to cooking food. This is a 19th century approach to cooking food, okay? I'm not saying that one is better than the other. But in this one, they're using science, everything from psychology to whatever, to help us eat more healthily, but still have it tasty. Because there's no reason for healthy food to taste bad. You're a good cook, you can make anything taste good.
Okay.
And I mean, that to me is the point. Now, if you eat with a smaller plate, they have found out, okay? If your plate is a little smaller, you tend to eat less.
So, ma'am, I think that will be a segue for the next section because someone from the marketing communications office of Ateneo, the head, like Matic Villanueva, will show us her food, which is healthy food that looks so delicious. So we're going to move to the next topic where from your presentation, you talked about Ghana and gutom. No? And so we're going to look at fasting and feasting. This food talk has been difficult because how do you show pictures of fasting, right? So here are some comments. Luigi says he fasts intermittent fasting, no, but not by choice. He says it happens naturally because when he gets into his work zone, he doesn't feel hungry. And he's in that state for as long as 8 to 12 hours, depending on what he has to do. My sister's like this. I couldn't believe they don't eat for half a day.
I'm like that. I'm like
Yeah, oh
that.
my gosh. Okay. And then Gilan Luarca from Fine Arts has been doing intermittent fasting for over a month, and
Oh,
he did it for weight loss and to follow the advice of his wellness therapist, because his diabetes doctor also agrees that there are no specifications for religion, that are his basis is really health. Skilty from the IS department used to do intermittent fasting but developed hyperacidity.
no, hyperacidity. Oh, how
So
terrible.
we have three different kinds of people. And then Matek, she did intermittent fasting during the lockdown because her workout routine diminished
Oh,
drastically.
yes.
And she knew that she had to counter that. She had to contain her food intake. Here are pictures she shared of what she eats to break her fast. And then these are very sad. I mean, the way it looks. She has her yogurt parfait with her
Wow.
espresso. And look at that fruit and yogurt
Wow.
and nuts and chia seed parfait. And then she would have this rye bread with omelette and mushrooms and things that are plucked from her garden. For example, in the next page, she has flowers edible flowers she'll pick to make her salad beautiful with a little, just not too much, just a little bit of cheese there and a little bit of toast, but it looks visually appealing. Brown rice with chicken and green. Every picture she sent makes me, that's it. Gagayahin ko na to. I want to eat this later.
Nakakagana na kayo.
Nakakagana siya, no? And this is after breaking a fast. You really don't want to shock your system either. Anyway, I don't know if there's more pictures. I see nung next natin there, no? Some people though, in your slide, you were talking about fasting and abstinence and feasting as a triumvirate. Nakakatuwa tong
Yes.
fasting, abstinence, and then feasting, no? But of course, ito na naman yung passive-aggressive guilt. Kasi naman yung gluttony is a sin and you're being told temperance is a desirable quality. Tatawagin kang matakaw, huwag kang matakaw. Etc. So let's take a look at how people, so Patrick Capili of the Modern Languages Department said he did try intermittent fasting. It was hard to stick to the diet scheme because he lived with senior citizens.
Oh,
You have to feed them.
I'm a senior citizen.
In the context of religion, he used to fast and abstain during the required days, and they would only eat fish on Fridays ever since he can remember, and fish-based meals on all Fridays of the year. All Fridays of the year. That's me. That's me. Mungo is Friday day. Friday is Mungo day, especially on Good Friday. Okay, continue. So this, Christine, I turn over the floor to you.
Yes, no. Yeah, I'm with you, Nikki, no, on Mungo weekends, no. So I always dedicate, if it's Lenten season, our diet dramatically changes, no? And I think I'm not sure if people still, or at least the younger generation, still follows this, especially those who no longer live with their families. No? I think our family setup, no, has changed the way we also follow these food traditions, no, that are related to religion. And speaking of religion, our co-moderator supposedly today, Feliz, no, shared these pictures of Ramadan iftar, no, in Malaysia, no, and the different ways in which the Muslims, no, would break fast, no, during Ramadan, no, and with Ramadan they would usually not eat, no, during the day, and or yeah, a long part of the day, no, and then from their morning prayers, which usually starts at around 4 o'clock in the morning, and then towards their evening prayers, no, and it's only perhaps depending on the time, no, they break their fast. No? So here are some of pictures now from, I guess, some of the fast the iftar, no, that she's consumed, no. I think next slide. She has this pasung, no, which is made from rice flour, and there's also typical tausug dishes, no, some of which involves this burnt coconut, no, that I had the fortune of tasting when I was in Zamboanga. There are also big, no, dishes, no, like this puti mandi, no, there are assortments of sweets, no, some in coconut, sticky coconut, and rice, no, sticky coconut and rice, no? And some are ube flavored even, no, and I think next one we have here these are also no tausug sweets, no, the puti mandi, no, and then the daral tausug. Kakanin, it's like lumpia with coconut. And then I've also tasted a suman that's covered in burnt coconut and some spices. Really good. And of course, you have snacks, no? Bagoong with sambal, no? And of course, next week, if I'm not mistaken, on May 2 and May 3 is already the Eid, no? And our Muslim friends now will be celebrating Eid. And I guess this is a friend of Ma'am Feliz na, as they, or the younger Feliz's friend, sorry, I forgot that there are two Felizes here, getting ready for iftar. No?
Yes.
So there, no? And I think there is that interesting idea of changing food practices and food consumption simply because our lifestyles have also changed, no? So would you like to spill the tea, no, on fasting and feasting, no, especially with the changes in terms of our lifestyles? Because I'm quite sure my friends who are already living alone did not fast during the Lenten season. No?
Well, if I may, I keep trying to remember the name of a military official who was the head of the Armed Forces Museum in the 80s, maybe, or 90s. And I was still in Metropolitan Museum of Manila at the time. And he paid me an unexpected visit, and we were chatting. And so it was close to lunchtime. And I said, well, would you like to have lunch? And he said, I can't have lunch because I'm Muslim. I said, oh, I understand. I said, well, would you like a glass of water? And he says, no, because when Muslims fast during Ramadan, we're not allowed to eat, and we're not allowed to drink water from sunrise to sunset. That got me thinking, and I said, wow. I mean, here we are so proud of the way that we fast. And here is this man who for the next, 1 month is not going to be having any food or water throughout the day. And then, my husband and I have a number of friends from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Muslim communities, Muslim countries. And I met this gentleman who was part of the Free Bangladesh, when Bangladesh was trying to separate from, was trying to get its independence. So he's this very nice gentleman of the old school, And he was explaining that when they break fast in the day, like at sunset, he said, the young people now, they don't know how to break fast. What do you mean? And he said, when you break fast so as not to shock your system, you get a cup of warm, not hot, of warm tea. And he says, you sip it little by little until your body feels that it is now ready to receive the meal. And when you eat, try not to gorge, he said. You have to eat little by little and only need what your body needs to recover. And then the next day, you can eat a little bit of breakfast if you wake up early before the fasting begins at sunrise. And, I was thinking, so the young people were also unable to really absorb the teachings of their elders about how to better deal with fasting. And then I started thinking about our own culture, and I said, come to think of it, some of the young people I know, when they fast, they really just gorge themselves immediately. The first thing they'll take is a soft drink, So I said, maybe again how to fast and condition the system to better shift from the no food or little food to a regular meal needs to be, I guess, needs to be thought through again and taught. So, I mean, that's one, that's just that's the practical side of it. And the reason why I personally started to respect Ramadan so much, I really started to respect the food customs of Ramadan. I don't think I could do no food, no water from sunrise to sunset for that number of days. I mean, it's gonna really take a lot of sacrifice on my part, you know. But I think the idea of fasting is part of the idea of becoming moderate or becoming temperate in how much we will eat. So again, maybe it needs to be revisited. Fasting isn't something that's old-fashioned. Fasting isn't something that's funny. Fasting isn't something only for those who are too religious, to use, what some of the young people feel. And so fasting, thankfully, does have now this intermittent fasting, which is reintroducing the idea of fasting. But the whole philosophical idea of personally deciding how much is enough, that is today's challenge. That is the challenge.
Ma'am, Gandhi says, the earth has enough to support our needs, but not enough to support our greed. And of course, he really used fasting a lot to cultivate the will. And for you to become nonviolent in all other spheres of life, you will need the internal resources. You need to cultivate your will. And I think that not couched in the language of faith, intermittent fasting and religious fasting both cultivate the will, even if the framing is of the different language, which is the behavioral change we need if we want a more sustainable world. And so our next topic is why it's so hard to cultivate the will, because our next topic is about how every person has a personal brand of deliciousness and has go-to food that bring them memories. It's about family and history and tradition and the only thing that helps you when you need to be comforted, all those things. So really, it's about cultivating the will to be self-reliant, because food is something you rely on for many other things, for all your other issues in life. So let's before that, let's start with poetry. I've been using that. Let's take a look at a poem from Rafael Brion.
Gusto mo bang maglambitin sa bituin? Tanong ng awit sa radyong ngayoy kapi-kapiling. O mag-uwi sa garapon ng sinag ng buwan? Ang totoo, kung ako ang tatanungin mo, ngayong napakalayo ko sa San Pablo, ganito lamang ang inaasam-asam ko. Awot, Quezon Puti, sukat bawang at sinangag, sa almusal, kaulam ang pagunita ni inay. Sabi nang huwag mong kainin ng tiyan. Hindi mo ba alam kung ano-ano ang laman niyan? At sa tanghali ay bangus na sinigang na hindi mahintay ni itay. Kaya 10:00 pa lamang handa na niya ang sinaing at paulit-ulit ang tanong, hindi pa ba tapos yan? At kung ano na lamang matira sa hapunan, nahaharapin ko lamang kapag nakauna ng atit bayaw ko ang aking mga pamangkin. Palaki na ng palaki, handa ng maglagalag, malapit na akong iwan, hindi lamang magdamag, kundi malamang na malamang, ni hindi sasabihin kung hanggang kailan.
And yeah, we can feel his father's desire for food, right? 10:00 pa lang di na makintay. And again, one more, from Michael Corosa. Sinlutong ng cornic ang iyong halakhak. Nagpaglakad tayong sabay sa pag-uwi. Sa galak, dila ko ay aking nakagat. Noon mo pa kamo hangad na ang landas ng tulay tahakin, ngunit di madali. Sinlutong ng cornic ang iyong halakha. Binili mo kamo ang una kong aklat. Tila ang pangalaway ibig mong mahingi. Sa galak, dila ako ay aking nakagat. Sa tulang pag-ibig ikay naiyak. Palibhasa kamo'y palagi kang sawi. Sinlutong ng cornic ang iyong halakha. Kung makata ka mo ang siyang liliyag sa iyo, siguro'y di na hihikbi. Sa galak, dila ko ay aking nakagat. Kinapos ang daan sa ating pinapak, na alat at aliw sa ilang sandali. Sinlutong ng cornic ang iyong halakha. Sa galak, dila ko ay aking nakagat. So,
Ay, nako.
I don't know, I'm just laughing. But there, okay, so, balik tayo serious. Remember, Ila, we met her before, no? So after the two poets reminding us how hard it is to cultivate the will, because food is about family, food is about love, no? Food is about memory. Okay, let's go back to Ila. Christine, papasok ko sa'yo si Ila.
Yeah, so on her end, no, all Filipino dishes can be made plant-based, no? And
Yes.
for instance, though it is conventional to have meat or seafood in one sinigang, no? Like the bangus, nako, nagutom ako dun sa bangus sinigang na. The same asim kilig, this is the same reason, no? The asim kilig experience can be enjoyed by using just produce, no? If one were to dissect sinigang, the key ingredient is the sampalok that gives it the distinguishing character as a soup, no? The use of vegetables, sitaw, okra, etc. go in the purely plant-based soup stock, and voila, no? You have your classic Filipino dish that's meat-free. Among other Filipino food that she loves and enjoys, no, that are plant-based, like kare-kare, lumpiang hubad, adobong sitaw, ginataang kalabasa at sitaw, pinakbet, minus the bagoong, no? I wonder what she uses, no? If you add vegan bagoong made from black beans, I haven't tried that, no? Eggplant bistek, no? Gising-gising, and so many more, no? And of course, there's tofu sisig, no? Which is also a source of comfort for her, no? Here, no, there's a picture of her mother's kare-kareng gulay, no? And I think thinking about Yala's, no, wonderful kare-kare, no, using Mamacita's mix, etc., no, it made me reflect, no, on the idea of taste, no, and this asim kilig, no, that we're looking for, no, and perhaps we can think of sustainability, no, in terms of are there ways for us to recreate to the flavors that we love, no? And perhaps preserve it, no? And I was thinking of some of the early preservation technique, no? And again, I'm looking back at all of these early recipe books that have been printed. Now they're all encouraging the canning of fruits in season, no? To preserve particular sweetness, etc. But I think perhaps would you like to spill the tea, no, on the ways in which we've preserved flavor, no, to make it more sustainable, no? Did we have, you know, I mean, I could think of tapa as one way to preserve meat back then, but are there others, no, that other techniques, no, that we've used, no, back in the day to preserve taste, no, to make it more sustainable, no? Did we use pickles too much? Have we as a nation lost our love for pickling, no? Kasi we only have a couple of select acharas, no? But I've seen like some recipes on pickling that I have never imagined before, like pickled onions, etc., from these recipe books. So would you like to share, no, or spill the tea with us, no, on your thoughts on flavor, preserving tastes, no, to make it more sustainable?
Well, I think maybe in some of our previous lectures, or is it this one? You know, I'm so confused already. I tried to show that our Filipino vocabulary is very rich in giving names to the different phases of when a fruit ripens. That's usually the example that I give, that we don't just say it's unripe, it's ripe, and it's overripe. We have a wide range. We have more than manibalang. There are words that mean between manibalang and ripe for, let's say, mango. In coconut, again, there's so many words that mean the thickness and the texture of the coconut meat and the quality of the coconut water. And these words are not, for instance, in our cooking schools or in our recipes, but they are proof that we have the ability and that our gastronomical sensitivity, the heritage, was able to taste, smell, these different subtleties. But today, we are rarely aware of those subtleties because we have taken the words and the nuances and the fact that these should be appreciated out of the food conversation. Because we tend to have, it's either ripe or it's not ripe. It's in a can and therefore that's how it is. But I'm sure you've noticed that even in the canning, let's say tomatoes, sometimes the tomatoes are perfectly ripe and red and they have that sweetness in them. But then you can open another can and the quality is not the same. They're kind of still yellowish and unripe, and that affects the flavor of the tomato. What I guess I'm trying to say is that sometimes we have jaded the tongue because, and I have become guilty of this because there are times too when I have a binge, I go on a binge and I shouldn't be eating a lot of, let's say, potato chips, okay? That's why I could relate to our first, I remember there was somebody who said, my comfort food is this bag of potato chips, okay?
Yeah.
I could relate to that because there are times when I look for salt and I look for it specifically in potato chips. And if I eat as much of it as I want until the craving goes away, afterwards, the food sensitivity, the flavor sensitivity that I usually have is gone. I can't taste because it's had too much salt, okay? The same thing happens if I go on a dessert binge. And, let's say there's a particular pastry. Let's say there's a French pastry that I like and you can't really get it unless you order from a chef. You have to order the whole tray. And then you give some away and then you keep some. And you have to eat it right away or it's not gonna taste good anymore, okay? So I finish it. I can sit down and finish it. Of course, I pay the consequences, right? But part of the consequence is not being able to taste as well as I used to taste. So, like sometimes before the pandemic, we would have young guests, meaning guests maybe in their 20s. Okay, yeah. And I noticed that when I cook for them, I have to have all kinds of side dishes that are extremely hot and spicy so that they can add it. Or the sweet and sour that they like is like double the sweetness and double the sourness. So everything is extreme, okay? If you don't have that, you don't have these additional things that they can add onto your basic cooking, they're gonna say, Tita, your food has no lasa. Your food's not good. Or they're gonna tell them, bakit Tita doesn't know how to cook anymore? Parang kulang ang lasa. But that's because this is a generation that is eating all these snack foods that are highly salty. They're used to fast food cooking. So when they go to this has happened to me. I brought a young friend to a really good gourmet meal. Okay. You know, one of these tasting meals.
Degustation.
Gustation, okay, are really good. Huh? I mean, like super, super gustation. At the end, I said, so, Iha, what do you think of the meal? Tita, ang liliit-liit naman ng portion. Hindi nakakabusog. Tapos, wala namang kalasa-lasa. Dapat dagdagan naman nila yung lasa. Sabi ko, oh my God. And this is the worst part. The worst part. Because every course has a matching wine. Okay? I'm not much of a wine drinker because I have an allergy. But I will take a sip because I like to see how it balances. Okay? Tita, masarap ang wine. But I was watching. She gulps it down. Because a lot of young people today, they love alcohol. They go out, they party the whole night before. My the mothers who are grandmothers my age, would say, ano ba yan? Umuuwi? Wala na. They're the sing, and it's part of growing up. So again, the taste buds cannot taste subtlety anymore. And yet we have a wonderful culture of subtlety. So kawawa yung mga maggagawa ng magtatayo ng mga restaurante. Kasi yung magiging mga clientele nila ay etong mga mas bata sa amin who are used to extremes in taste. So what are you going to do? And yet, that's it. We should be proud of the fact that we have all these subtleties. Sa ibang mga kultura, pinagyayabang nila talaga. Naku, we have thousands and thousands of words that mean all these subtleties in the change of the texture, in the change of the flavors. Meron din naman tayo, baka hindi ganyan kadami. Problema, hindi natin ginagamit.
Ma'am, I'm wondering if that's related to our first lecture on how rice took such a central role. Because I read a book somewhere that says the sharp flavors are in contrast and balance with the blandness of rice. So that is why many of our dishes, yung mga paksiw, or yung talagang super alat, your kalamansi with the patis or toyo, is really the asim. Nothing is subtle. Everything is sharp. Everything is tamis. Yung parang, you're squinting sharp. And they said the balance is not in the dish, but with the rice.
It's how much you put on the rice. That's true. And if you study, you study the differences in provincial tastes. My mother's side is Visayan, okay, so Ilonggo. And I married, it's Ilonggo. And so I got used to a certain kind of cooking, okay? And then I married into my father's Tagalog and Caviteño also, but I married into a Tagalog, Binondo, Caviteño family. And I noticed that their sinigang is really maasim. But the sinigang that I grew up with is very mild.
See, so that the one that uses the fruit?
Whatever it be, whether they use sampalok, whether they use kamyas, whatever. Whatever they use as a souring, it's the intensity.
Batuan daw. Batuan.
Well, batuan is associated with Visayan sinigang. And the batuan is also used as a flavoring before grilling, But Batuan, I just like us to remember that while we think of it as Visayan, and certainly I think of it as part of my Ilonggo heritage, Batuan was available in Luzon. If you look at the early 1600s, Batuan is there. It's just that it kind of probably, maybe it lost favor. I don't know. I haven't been able to track because Batuan always is there. And then at some point, Batuan is not associated with Tagalog cooking. Instead, it's associated with Visayan cooking. So again, there are these changes. But my concern, going back to Lasa, is Lasa keeps changing. The degree of what we consider sour or appropriately sour or sweet or bitter, or piquancy. Okay, this is another one, piquancy. I remember when we didn't really seem to like hot food that much. It was again temperate. There were some parts of the country where people liked food a little more piquant than other parts of the country. And then all of a sudden, we started being exposed to foreign foods that were by their nature inherently more they use more chili and more different kinds of chilies that we didn't have here. And so before you knew it, and I can't blame people, I mean, there's something wonderful about the wide variety of piquancy that chilies can bring. But then what was happening was that foods that were not piquant or that piquant suddenly would arrive at your place setting super hot, super piquant. Now, you see, before, what you would do is you had everything from fresh labuyo to fresh ginger and fresh garlic. You would add it on as you desired. So your personal desire for that moment, for that particular meal, could be satisfied. You weren't stuck with a dish that was too hot for you, because that's it. You were supposed to condition it to the moment. That is actually the way we eat. We want to personalize it. We want to be able to use all the sawsawans. Let's say I start my meal, and somewhere along the way, I'm getting bored with the way it tastes. So I'll say, okay, let me add a little more patis.
Yeah.
I add a little more patis. I'm very, very happy. But then I'm getting bored again. But I'm beginning to taste the salt too much. So what do? The old style was there would be a ripe mango or there would be banana on the side. I would take a little bit of that and that would neutralize it, you see? And then I would start all over again. And then I would say, okay, I think I'll have the vegetable now. It has, what's this? It has coconut milk. So that again would help to in my particular mouth and in my particular brain for the moment, it would work out. But this being able to make timpla at the table to suit your desire is disappearing because it's very expensive for a restaurant to do.
But Mama,
you're gonna be lugi.
I'm beginning to feel something that I see in literature and music as well when it comes to Filipinos. The chef in the Western has the control. The way the author is also named, and he is the author of the masterpiece. And then the musician, he is, you follow the notes. But then with Filipinos, when traditional literature is passed on and on and on, some of them are unauthored. And it is really the one who is reading, who is going to give their own kind of take because they're like their own version. And the cook also is the one, you are the one also dictating how it will be tasting. And so I have this feeling that I see that in literature as well. When we sing, when we do music, oído, by, we're not respecting the notes. We are doing always our own rendition. And I feel that when you were talking, I was like, I've seen this before in performances and art. Sorry, Ariel, nagra-raise ka ng hand. May nararamdaman ka din ba? Oh, Ariel.
It's true because it's very funny. When I was in university, I don't know how it is now, but when we were in university, they would always say the rugged individualism. They want you to be the rugged individual, okay? And I used to say, I think in the Philippines, it maybe it needs a little bit of marketing, because if you ask for precision, this idea of precision is there. We want to be precise. We want it to be excellent. Don't get me wrong. But how we go about it might not be the same way as we are instructed in the how-to guide to do it. We'll say, well, no, I think I want to do it this way. And you might come up with the same product, or you might come up with a better product. It's the nature. It's the same thing with food. Where June De Leon and I would agree is in the halo-halo. We are a halo-halo culture. We like diversity in everything, and we want to put our personal stamp. Somehow we just, it's ours, it's mine, it's my way of cooking, it's my way of eating. So if that be the case, in situations where one needs uniformity, let's say you really need uniformity as your baseline. So how do we deal with a culture that really wants to have my personal stamp?
Ariel is raising his hand. Can we call him? Yes. Ariel, go.
Hi, ma'am. Yes, so gusto ko pong ikwento din yung marami na rin kasi napag-usapan, but I wanted to share yung the collective and the individual, that conversation with the collective and the individual. I remember kanina kasi I wanted to share yung may putahe sa binibida ko po talaga yung Marikina, no, kasi taga doon po kasi ako natuto kumain because that's where I grew up. So may pinagmamalaki kami, tawag namin everlasting ang tawag, because it's a dish that doesn't spoil. Ito po ay parang tortang giniling kasi may itlog na niluluto sa lanera. So it is steamed. But the secret pala to the everlasting, that's why it stays so long, it's because sinasangkot siya sa suka yung giniling. So yung pala yun, kaya pala siya everlasting. But you don't taste the suka. Why? Because it has tomato sauce. May narinig din po akong version na may pinya yung pineapple juice, hindi suka. So but it's the acid that helps the sustainability of that dish. So yun yung isa, yung pwede siyang ipanregalo sa pag may piyesta. Iuwi mo na to. So kahit tapos na yung piyesta, kahit 1 week after, yung lanera ay everlasting, rather, ay buhay pa. Number 1. Number 2, on the collective and the individual, I remember again, yung magkapit-bahay na magluluto sa isang bahay, nung maraming giniling, they will sangkutsa it in vinegar, but they will also bring that home because they will then continue the cooking based on how their household would like to season the everlasting. So syempre meron ngang may kamatis, merong maglalagay ng pinya, merong and whatever else, kung mas maitlog. So I think yun lang yung that experience of some steps are cooked as a collective, isamput siya natin lahat sa gulay, or maybe the step of, just slicing the ingredients together, kung may bell pepper, ganun. But at some point, they also part ways together with the partially cooked ingredients, in this case, the ground meat, because they will continue the cooking in their individual taste. So kahit mamiesta ka sa iba-ibang bahay, pwede kang mag-sampling, degustasyon ng lanera, ng everlasting bawat bahay. So that's what I wanted to share about yung sustainability ng pagluluto, na suka is the magic ingredient, but also the collective and the individual. Yun
Sorry,
lamang po.
Earl also is raising his hand kanina pa. So let's also give a chance. Earl, yes?
I just remembered something from what Ariel said, because I also am studying in UP right now, and I'm taking my master's in hotel, restaurant, and institution management. So I think around September there was an issue about adobo, and I wrote something about adobo on why it can't be standardized, because we all have our different taste preferences. So given that, would you say there would be any like cultural prefix on how much vinegar would a certain culture put under adobo, on the context of you would still have the culture of sausawan after? Although I don't really think that adobo is an ulam compatible with sausawan, but I think that could be challenged otherwise.
Maybe with achara.
Ang maaring kasama po ng adobo madalas, no? Madalas would be either a bagoong, no, to make it more salty if you want, and it's usually the ginisang bagoong, no, which is a dish in itself actually. And then sometimes the sweet and sour pickles. Tapos yung achara, yung mga achara, kanya-kanya yan eh. Yung iba maasim. Mas maasim kaysa sa matamis. Yung iba, mas matamis kaysa sa maasim. So, in a way, those provide the suka. Yung iba naman, ang kasama po nila ng adobo, palaging meron ensalada. Yung ensalada nila, yung iba, yung the red egg and or the cucumber, no? Tapos, ang dressing natin has no oil. It's usually just vinegar and salt and maybe black pepper. So, meron din mga maidagdag sa asim of an adobo. Tapos, ang ibang adobo, di naman maasim. No? Depende din kasi sa klase ng suka na ginagamit. Yung ibang suka inherently napakaasim. Yung ibang suka naman may tamis-tamis ng konti, no? So, tapos depende din yan kung yung suka ay yung batang suka o kung yung suka is talagang the aged vinegar. So, maraming mga considerations. I guess, but the whole thing is, mahirap siguro dito gumawa talaga magtayo ng restaurante dito. Kasi the Filipino really wants to be able to add, to personalize, no? So if that is the case, that's why I keep saying this year, one of the ideas that I have offered for the KainCon, I said, I think maybe we need to look at personalization, customization, that it is actually part of the way we eat. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is how we eat. And actually, it may or may not be only ours. If you go to other parts of Asia, you will see that they also are customizing, you see. It's just that they don't call it that, and they don't stop it. Whereas maybe here in the formal restaurants, we don't put a lot of the sausawans anymore because that's it. It's not cost effective. Or maybe because we are now thinking that we should be cooking with it perfect. Kung ano yung luto ng chef, yun yan. I mean, who will quarrel with the chef? So baka meron din pumapasok na
Values.
ganyan, no? But I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
So,
But
ma'am,
yes.
we have
Yes.
we would have one last topic on sustainability, the future of sustainability.
Anong oras na ba?
Oh,
Hala.
left, I've done, pero 3 slides left if it's okay with you. So just to bring it back, this talk kasi is a story on sustainability. And so today we've looked not just at taste, no, but looked at fasting and feasting and all those things. And we just have 3 contributions left. The next slide comes from a unit in Ateneo. This is from Edgardo Valenzuela. Because of the Sustainable Development Goals, it's just 30 seconds, no? There's a food systems group in Ateneo. And this is a combined
way to have emergency food? Well, just have your own aquaponics in your backyard. You can grow your plants on top. This is Chinese kangkong. And you can have your own tilapia or whatever fish below. See you.
Ma'am Feliz, there was a group that has a joint project between Ateneo and Xavier University in Cagayan. And it's a UN Sustainable Development and Food Security Systems and Sustainability Group. And one of the things they're pushing for in food systems is yung aquaponics. So one of our teachers from the Ateneo School of Government shared his aquaponics with fish at the bottom. And then I'm going to share, it's just a minute also, my own son, Giho, is an ambassador for Rural Rising, and this is his rap on food rescue buys. And it's, if you'll only give me a minute, I'll share it.
Later.
Hindi ako kumakain ng gulay. When it was served at home, I wouldn't even try. Then my mama bought Rural Rising Rescue Buy. Tumami ang gulay sa aming bahay. Rural Rising Rescue Buy, ask my mama why. Rural Rising Rescue Buy, ask my mama why. She said, son, we all have to do our part. We don't just chew with our mouths, we can choose with our hearts. If we knew the people behind the food we had to cart, if we saw our link to them, well, that's a good start. Rural Rising Rescue Buy, ask my mama why. Rural Rising Rescue Buy, ask my mama why. Ang hirap na magsasakay, ating isipin. Ang tinanin nila, dapat natin bilhin. Kahit ako, meron pwede gawin. Ang gulay sa lamesa aking kakainin. Ang Rural Rising, sila ay tulay para makarescue ng mga gulay. Bata lang ako, ano pwede ibigay? Itong munting rap, ang aking alay. Join the rescue buy to get the rural rising high. Join the rescue buy to get the rural rising high. Yeah.
And then
Salamat.
one last slide. Similar to Rural Rising, another group. I'm It's Marichi. Yeah, Christine, take it away.
Right. So, Mama Richino shared how her family subscribes to this Veggies for Good, no, a social enterprise started by our friend Litzy Carolino and her husband Ison Garcia, no, when the pandemic started. The produce of Veggies for Good is fresh, pesticide-free, and affordable, no, and they buy their vegetables, no, from broccoli, lettuce, French beans, lemons, and brown eggs. And more importantly, it's a social enterprise, no, that benefit farmers, nanays, and riders whose livelihoods have been disrupted by COVID-19 lockdowns. No? And so this farm-to-table movement, no, has a vital role to play in our pandemic context. No? And as a tagline for Veggies for Good, she says, namamalengke ka na, nakakatulong ka pa. No? And I think that idea of community, and it's really interesting how our food waste is going back to how it used to be, no? That we are now going to our farmers, we're now trying to understand our food better, no? To really help our challenges, no? With food sustainability. And I think for at least to wrap up this talk, no, you've given us wonderful lessons from history about sustainable practices no, in the past. No? But perhaps as we end our talk, no, would you like to give at least one last tip no, on food sustainability? No? Perhaps to spill the tea no, on sustainable practices in the past that we can definitely use no, in the present, something that would still be, not really impossible for us to do, but one that we can maintain no, across generations, hopefully.
Yes, yes. I think that's a nice way to end today's talk. The beautiful thing is that one can see that history in the making today is already about making life, not just the food, but making life more sustainable. Meaning our choices of how we are living today, the food that we're eating, how many new clothes we're buying, what we're buying in general. But we're now becoming a little bit more conscious that if we overdo it, it may not be good for now, and it may not be good for the future. So I think that if we, especially those of us who are in university, we are in positions where our minds are being cultivated and where our capacity to be critical, our capacity to think through the choice of what we are going to do. I think that that is what is important now for all of us who have to make these day-to-day decisions that are going to have impact on today and on the future, that each one of us is now starting to think, maybe there's a better way, maybe there's a new way to think and to decide. That's what we just need to keep in mind. And if you attend the next conversation, pardon my dog, if you attend the next conversation, I think we will be again having more ideas to help us make better decisions and really embed sustainability into what we desire to be our new habits in eating for the future. That's it.
And with that, maybe we could call someone to wrap up today's event with her closing remarks. The first person I ever heard about this anyway is from Karina Velasco of the Ateneo University Press. Can we call her now to deliver the closing remarks? Karina?
Yeah, I was waiting to be unmuted.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Hi, parang it's so hard to end these discussions. Food is always so rich to talk about. There's so much to talk about. So thank you, Felice, for that richly layered presentation showing us how taste and words find each other in the tongue and nestle there for centuries. How food historians, a growing bunch now under your inspiration and leadership, disaggregate colonial policies, ideas, and things, religious or otherwise, brought in by colonizers, by fads or trends. Thank you to Nikki and Christine for the feedback or related topics which you gathered from the Ateneo faculty. It's such a delightful counterpoint to Felice's talk, bringing in even poetry. I don't know if you brought in songs also in the past, and which you for all these episodes have been doing beautifully. Now I'm just going to all your talk, Felices, all your episodes and the informal surveys, all and of course the topic today is sustainability, have all made us mindful of how we can sustainably eat, meaning how can we now eat so that we don't put at risk the planet that will sustain the next generations. How 7 billion people today, how should 7 billion people eat today to determine if the planet can still feed 10 billion people in 2050? And I hope we will no longer say, how people react to climate activism. They always say, oh, that's too far away in time for me, or I'm just a family of 5 and cannot affect anything significantly, or that we're too far away from Ukraine or China to be affected. I think the pandemic has shown us very clearly on 2020 vision, nothing is too far away in time or space, or too tiny and single an act to have an impact on a global scale. You have to remember the pangolin sold as meat, a delicacy in a Wuhan market, and how that literally stopped the world, and how the invasion of Ukraine at the other end of the world has caused food prices, even here, to go up. As the world got bigger in terms of people, the world got smaller in terms of technology and economic interdependence. Everyone is connected now, as tech ads always say. So I remember this statistic from a September 2019 issue of Financial Times. Financial Times. It kind of sticks in the throat, because since the beginning of agriculture, it says only 7,000 plant species out of a known 250,000 have been used by humans as food, according to the United Nations biodiversity experts. So that means it's only just been 12 crops and 5 animal species, which make up 75% of global calorie intake. The study done by 37 scientists from 16 countries, who they were asked to examine how the world should feed itself in the future, says, and I quote, food production already accounts for about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions and 40% of land use. Around 70% of fresh water drawn from lakes and rivers services agriculture. So as we push for citizen science, that movement to show how citizens of the world can change a few things in their behavior so as to save the planet, no matter how difficult, we must begin to learn and promote sustainable, healthy eating. So it isn't just healthy eating, but sustainable, healthy eating. I know that sounds dreadful and terrible for us. Sci-fi or spec-fic scenarios of muted inside surroundings of gray and white and one single capsule complete in dietary requirements as our daily food come to mind, and we shiver. But unhealthy diets and the global food production that makes that possible are the biggest single driver of environmental degradation. Meat production and greenhouse gases are not just about the farting cows, but also substantial emissions in the production of chicken feeds. Also, around 60% of the world's fish stocks are either fully fished or overfished. Food waste has to be massively cut. We're talking about the Anli and the buffets. A third of the food produced globally for humans ends up lost before it reaches the shelves, or thrown away after from homes and restaurants. So needless to say, we have to advocate for an urgent, radical transformation of the global food system. It's difficult, but they're now proposing, in fact, this same group of scientists, a sustainable health diet that promises to feed 10 billion people without causing catastrophic damage to the planet. So I don't know if we have time to discuss this diet, but the way they define sustainable diets, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, they say low environmental impacts which contribute to food and nutrition security and to healthy life for present and future generations, protective and respectful of biodiversity and ecosystems, culturally acceptable, accessible, economically fair and affordable, nutritionally adequate while optimizing natural and human resources. So this radical shift, which we said was needed yesterday, as Felice says, unquestionably urgent. It shall influence and shape the taste of next generations. It will involve the entire world. Europe and North America need to cut back on red meat on a large scale. East Asia needs to cut back on fish, and Africa on starchy vegetables. And we poor countries are always aspiring to eat like the rich countries. And this is even worse, the steak slabs and all that. So the planetary health diet does not completely banish meat and dairy, but that we get most of our protein from nuts and legumes such as beans and lentils instead. So the diet is here, but as we are running out of time, there's still tremendous variety in this diet and wide room for palatable mixing and preparation, as Felice was saying. These foods can be put together in thousands of different ways to make them delectable in taste and look according to religious and cultural preferences. This certainly is not a deprivation diet. It is interesting, creative, healthy eating that is flexible and enjoyable. This diet requires us to change what we pile onto our plates and to turn to foods that we barely know, have not seen, nor want to eat. Our children will start families. They will need to surround the new foods we have to eat with emotional pleasantness and warm memories. Maybe the body chemistry will follow also and also evolve. Marketing and advertising will have to build up these foods as desirable and accessible. And as Felice said, we not only make history, but shape the future. And so we today are the influencers and the determiners of what next generations will want and like to eat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for the closing remarks. I now call on the Dean of the School of Humanities, because they're also hosts of the program, for acknowledgements. Dean Jonathan? Please unmute pala, sorry. Please unmute. Ayan. I think he's muted. Unmute kay Dean John.
Here we go. Yeah. That's a gag order, isn't it? So, just to say thank you to again to our speaker, Felice, and also to all the participants, in the Zoom room and those people who are watching. Special thanks to our co-host today, Christine Santos, okay, and of course the staff of the IS department, for preparing the program, and people from the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, and even the Office of the Vice President for Social Development. They all participated in today's program. I'm just here to acknowledge, say thank you also to the Office of the Vice President for the Loyola Schools for helping to fund this. My office, the Ateneo University Press, represented by Karina Velasco, for the seed of this activity, the Filipino Food Month National Secretariat, the University Marketing Communications Office, the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, the Ateneo Library of Women's Writings, the Campus Events Management Team headed by Chris Castillo, okay. Aliu, mentioned that already, Christine is still here, and the Interdisciplinary Studies Department team. I hope you can join us again for the final installment of the series. We look forward to the book that comes after it. Here it is. Number 4, are we 21st century culinary influencers? I think Karina Velasco gave us a hint of the answer already, but we'll have to wait for next week to get the full picture. We also invite you to view previous episodes and this one on our YouTube channel. Now, Conversation 1 and 2 are already up. We expect this one to be up soon. And that's it. Thank you for attending this talk.
Thank you, everybody. And that's the end of our program.
Thank
Bye. Bye.
Enjoyable. Thank you.
Yay.
Bye, Felice.
Okay, I think we've stopped recording. We can now talk like okay, thank you, everyone. Ariel, will you ever,
please?
Ariel, host ka Thursday. So Ariel joined us today, joined us the last. Yay!
Salamat po, oo, salamat. Kahit po nung bago magmahal na